You can do Warrior 2 and just have a good time. Or you can do Warrior 2 and really get a deeper understanding of how to bring your body into a place where everyone's showing up to support the team.
Right, because eventually you'd like to go to side angle pose, and then you want to be able to take a bind, and then you want to be able to stand on one foot, and then what's that called when you wrap yourself around and then you bend over and then you stand up and your legs up in the air?
Yeah, I love that one. Bird of Paradise.
Okay, so we talked about some common complaints. We covered the hip fairly well. I do think we might need to go back and underscore that when the pelvis rotates towards the front leg, that's the opposite of squaring. But for many, it's not far off from square.
Yeah.
I think part of squaring energy to the hip is to help facilitate the psoas release on the back leg, and I understand that avenue. We're just saying that it's anatomically impossible for both legs to be open to 90 degrees with the hips square.
Yeah.
It's 45. And so that back leg then goes into what's called extension. It's not pure abduction. It's definitely abducted, but it's also now more behind the pelvis, which is a psoas release. When you put that back leg behind you, like in a Warrior 1, you are looking for hip flexors to stretch because the muscles at the front of the leg and hip are getting longer. So
Right.
that's what's lengthening.
Right.
And so then we can start to think of this as the back leg of a lunge, the back leg of Warrior 1. The leg just happens to be more out to the side. So then we want the glute of that leg working. We want to be pulling that thigh back in space so the thigh bone isn't hanging forward.
Right.
And we want that calf pressing forward. We want shins forward and thighs back, which is a very typical, fantastic, broad scope. Any yoga teacher can use that kind of cueing to help improve alignment in their poses. Jane said, imagine that sandbag on the top of your thigh as you sink down, as she's stretched up and lengthened away. Mm-hmm. That sandbag is doing thighs back. It's the front of the thigh towards the back of the thigh. It's the thigh bone away from your quad and towards your hamstring. Same thing happening in the back leg. Soften the knee, press the shin forward. Shin forward in the front leg is bending into that knee.
Yeah, and I love the shin forward. And I like shin forward better than bend the knee. Because if I'm like, take your shin forward, your knee is going to bend, right? That's going to be a result. But I feel like when people are thinking that the movement is the joint, that somehow it's not as helpful as them understanding the direction that they're trying to move the tissue.
I just see a lot of hyperextension of the back knee, the straight leg.
God kills me.
So then that's when I would say, like, soften the knee.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, you're exactly right. It's two ways of saying the same thing, and then just see which cue lands in the class or for your individual student if you're working individually.
Yeah, I was thinking of the shin forward primarily with the front leg. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really thinking of it in the back leg. You never want to be aggressively in a joint. You just really don't want to be
That's the
aggressively
fainting couch. That's just the collapsing and the hanging out in your joints.
Yeah.
You can get that front knee to bend by putting a block.
I love that, underneath the shin on an angle.
Between the shin and the wall. I know not everybody has a wall.
Oh, that's the front one.
Yeah.
I love this at a wall.
Yeah.
Like you just come. You
don't drop
stand,
the block.
Hip distance apart. Put the block in between your shin and the wall. As you bend your knee, take your back leg back as far as you can. And then it's so nice because you can take your front hand and press into the wall.
Yeah.
And you spin your ribs because there is a rotation in the ribs in this, right? The hips are squaring, right? But they're not squared. But we can get the ribs to square to the long edge of the mat. So there's going to be a little bit of a rotation in the torso. And that feels really, really nice.
Yeah, and isolating that rotation so it just happens in the thoracic is key, because once you have the pelvis sort of fixed, that lumbar spine and the pelvis, they move together and they shouldn't start to grind and be twisting opposite of each other. So it's extremely important that you get that length that Jane was talking about. You get that lift of the ribs, and then you isolate that rotation, squaring the ribs to the long edge of the mat just in the ribs. You didn't follow with your pelvis because then that knee comes in,
The
that
knee will
knee
come
falls
in.
in. You're pressing the knee out with your hand as you lift and lengthen and turn just the rib cage. And then there's that counter rotation in the cervical spine of looking over the front hand.
Right.
So lots of twist in this pose, surprisingly.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny that we're talking about it because I know that when I'm doing it, but somehow I don't think of it when I'm thinking this is
It's not how we were taught.
Yeah, that's true.
The twisting was never in there. I mean, the neck rotation, of course, was,
Yeah.
but it was very much that old school cueing as you're squared in
to
the chest,
front, and then you just
pelvis
spin
squared.
your leg out.
Yeah, and since we can say that yoga was developed by men, many men have this retroverted hip where they have excessive, more than what's typical, access to external rotation and really being able to turn those legs out. And then you put yourself in the really hot climate,
Right.
you know, and it kind of makes sense, the ligament laxity, and we can really get these legs turned out with everything square.
Right.
And so again, every cue is valid for a certain population, and we're just seeing such a high level of labral femoral acetabular impingement injuries in women, especially in yoga, hip replacements and yoga teachers, that we're saying like, hey, maybe this old cueing isn't working for every body.
Right. Right.
So how do we change that? How do we evolve that cueing?
Yeah. Yeah. I almost think that it's just a place to start from. We should assume that you're going to want to fine tune.
1000%. I mean, we're just taking broad strokes. This is like our best practices.
Right.
And then individual results will vary. And when it doesn't work for you, this is like when it gets exciting, because then you're like, okay, well, what are we missing? Did we
Right.
forget about pelvic tilt? Did we forget about the core? Do we forget about lengthening the spine? Did we forget about bending into the knee? Did we forget about the back heel?
Right.
It's such a complex pose, and you lose one part and then you gain something else. And then
So you
you're just
keep
shoring
moving
it up
yeah.
until your habits get a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. And we haven't even gotten to the arms, right? So the arms are extending away from the torso, and you've got a really nice wide wingspan. And the first thing most people do is they lift their shoulders up towards their ears, and then they've got basically the traps and some of the neck muscles are trying to hold these arms up, and they're like, I'm dying here. And they look really uncomfortable too.
And it fatigues quickly.
It super fatigues quickly.
Yeah, because those muscles are typically holding the weight of the arms all day anyway, because the shoulders are so anteriorly displaced and so internally rotated. And then they just maintain that alignment as the arms abduct. We've got shoulder abduction and hip abduction.
Yeah, and so this is one of the places with the arms where I'm like, we need to get the hardware set up so that you're actively on top of the hardware, but you're not doing this with the tissue, right? So you got to get your shoulder heads to neutral. And often what I'll do with people is I'll just be like, take your palms up and drop your shoulders away from your ears, and then rotate the forearms internally, right? And then you just kind of, ooh, that feels nice, right? And then you're going to rotate. But if you're using your neck and your traps, oh my gosh.
And then you try to turn your head, it's even,
then
it feels even worse.
That gets in the way. And that's
Right.
another part with the turning of the head that's tricky too, right? So the easiest way for the rotations to happen is if everything's stacked over each other, right? So if the skull's over the ribs, over the pelvis, you're going to get the most availability of rotation. So if you're someone who brings your head forward in space, and I'm asking you to take your arms and I'm asking you to get an external rotation, so probably your pecs are going to be getting a nice stretch here. It's an opening in the front of the chest. And then I ask you to rotate your head. There may be a chance that your head has come forward in space. And then it's like, oh God, that's like uncomfortable. So get your neck back. Get your neck goddamn back, right? Get your ears over your shoulder heads, which are over your hip joints. And then just spin the head, right? If you could keep your nose and just have your nose like move to the side, right? Not down. I don't want it to go up. I want it to stay level and the nose to go to the side. Then you get a nice rotation. I was telling a class, I was like, okay, you're on your back. I just want your nose to go to the right. And it's so great because people were paying attention, but they're like, what the fuck am I doing with my nose? Like, I mean,
the head's
nose,
following.
Yeah, the nose isn't moving. Right?
Nose yoga.
It was just like, I just want your nose not to tip down or up. That was what I wanted to do. But they were sitting there going like, she's asking me to move my nose to the side, and this makes no sense
like
at all.
a little rabbit. And the nose is at the height of that suboccipital region, which is where we want that rotation to happen. Yeah, that's C1, C2. So you're not turning from the base of the neck as much as you're just like a little bobblehead, like just spinning the head on top of the rest of the spine independently.
Yeah.
So how do we get the shoulder placement? Do you want to lead with
Well,
that?
when you're taking your upper arms and you rotate them externally a little bit and you're doing that, you should be able to feel the shoulder blades. I want them set on the back, right? So I want the upper shoulder blades to be broad a little bit, the lower shoulder blades to be moving in towards each other a little bit, not tons. I don't want it excessive. And so that they're just there as a foundational support, like in a building that your arms can rest on.
Right. And so the arm bone sits into the socket, and the socket is on that shoulder blade.
And I love that too. And you had talked about having the arms up a little bit higher really than shoulder height, because what that'll do is it'll drop the head of the humerus a little bit more comfortably in the socket.
Yeah. So it's shaped like a golf tee. And I think you'd use a great analogy of the saucer. A little very shallow dish is the socket. And then the head of the arm bone sits into that socket. And since it's so shallow, we can move the arm in such big motions, but it's not very stable. So then the body made these muscles that are lying on all the surfaces of that shoulder blade to create an anchor, a strong anchor for the arm. And the tendons reach out and grab a hold of the arm bone, and they prevent the arm bone from pulling too far out of the socket, and they allow it to move. This is what assists this rotation of the arm. And what happens is, because the arm bone it's shifted so far forward and it's internally rotated, those tendinous fingers reaching out are just barely clutching to the head of the arm bone, and they're very strained. And so half the people are walking in with the femoral acetabular impingement, and the other half are walking in with rotator cuff, or they have both issues. Yeah. So in order to get the head of the arm bone back, we can take the arms a little bit more ahead of the body, internally rotate them, thumbs down, palms out, draw the head of the arm bone back in the socket, and then sort of push open like you're doing a breaststroke through water. You're pushing open. You get the back muscles to fire. So you've got all the back muscles holding your arms on, not the neck, not the top of the shoulder. And then just like Jane said, spin that upper arm externally, your palms face up, stay there, that's great. Or just rotate from the elbow, rotate just the palms down for the more final look of the pose.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
And Jane had mentioned too, having that arm a little higher, more like a flag pole sticking out of the little thing that attaches to the side of your house to hold that. So the flag pole holder on the side of your house is very much like a little rotator cuff scapula. And then the flag pole itself is the arm bone. And so we want that flag not drooping, not parallel to the floor hanging down. We want that kind of erect and up. And we drop the arm back into its little holder, and then we can spin the arm externally. And you feel this little firming and coiling around the lateral edge, the outer edge of the shoulder blade. And it's far away from the top of the shoulder. Again, when we feel it somewhere like at the top of the shoulder, how do we go to the bottom of the shoulder complex and get some of these other muscles to support from underneath?
Yeah, that's so fun, because it's like so many of the ways that these poses become light is by the other parts of the body really doing their job. So if I'm taking my arms out and I'm only asking my traps and my neck to hold them up, that's like brutal. So I need the full team. And I love that. So we're just really like bringing all of the tissue into support and hold up these arms. I love that.
And what's that movie? Here's me trying to remember the name of a movie again. It's like where the plant wants to eat everything and he has to keep feeding the plant and it grows to the monstrous size. Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I have no memory for movies.
Neither
it's
do
really
I.
Bizarre.
I don't either know.
Oh, good.
So my first husband had like that encyclopedic mind. He was like, oh, you mean that 1942 movie with this director who was born in France and then was an avant-garde pioneer? You mean that movie?
Yeah, and I'll be like, I didn't watch it last week.
I remember broad sweeps of symbolism. I remember how the movie made me feel. I don't know the names of the actors, the director, the cinematographer, the year, nothing.
No.
So I think it was Little Shop of Horrors, the movie, and there's that girl who has the whiny voice. She's the main character, right? And she's great. I love her. And at the end, she sings. And I was like, like buckets of tears. Like this woman stepped up and just could sing her fucking heart out. And this is these other muscles coming in. I just underestimated this woman, and she comes in and she's a powerhouse.
That's
and
cool.
This is what we want to find in our body, is like, let something step up and show you how powerful it can be.
That's cool. That's cool. I love the fact that we can do these, references to movies when neither of us are able to reference movies well. But
you all know what we're talking about, right?
Someone does.
Ellen Green played Audrey in the movie, and she can sing her heart out.
So this way the arms are feeling kind of light. You're feeling powerful, and the arms are like light. They're just like fierce. Mm-hmm. Everything feels fierce in this pose.
Yeah, you got that warrior energy and that discernment of using the right things to fight your battle, instead of like when we were young, you'd get mad at someone and I'm going to yell at you and like let it all out, and it's all just a big mess.
Right.
And now we can be so much more constructive in our warrior energy. We're simultaneously protecting, embodying values, and we're not just mindlessly destroying our body in order to take a shape. Right. And so if you take some of these new shapes that we're suggesting that are a little bit different from the traditional cueing, which we're saying we understand the origin, but can you evolve that practice and see what it offers you? I'm not too old that I can't learn new tricks.
No, and as we age, we are constantly having to learn new tricks. Because if we're paying attention, we're always working with a different hand. Everyone's working with a different hand every morning they get up.
You mean a different hand of cards?
Well, yeah. It's like you wake up and you're like all of a sudden, I have a cataract and I can't see out of one eye. That's going to affect my balance. It's like you wake up and
something shifted. Keep up.
Something shifted.
Yep.
And I remember really clearly when my daughter's soccer team was at that age where they were growing leaps and bounds, and the coach was like, it's a hysterical time because their foot just grew like overnight, and so they don't know how to kick the soccer ball anymore because their limbs are different than they were yesterday. And so that happens.
It still happens.
And it happens, maybe in reverse, but whatever's going on. Every day you wake up with a different deck of cards to play with. I love that you mentioned discerning, because that's a very important part of the warrior energy. That's a very important part of yoga, is getting this ability to discern, right? And so there's such this specificity at seeing what's going on and what's working and what's supporting and what adaptations do I need. We do not want to be careless in our work, in our effort. We want to be curious, attentive, and discerning. And so in this warrior pose, there's this really clear focus. And I've been told the gaze is a soft gaze, just beyond the tip of the thumb, right? Just kind of beyond. And it's the laser focus and the ability to be fully supported that allows you to move easily and confidently.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The viveka, that discernment, is likened to a sword, and it cuts through the knots of our resistance.
Yeah.
External and internal.
So that's cool. And when I was working with it today, I did all this stuff to prep. Like, I've been amazed when we're working on these poses, the amount of backing up I do.
Yes.
And now that we've been working on these poses and picking apart, going into the weeds, is I will spend so much time preparing the body to do a pose that I used to think was a warm-up.
100%. And Warrior 2 is a good warm-up.
Yeah.
Just like a high lunge.
I took the pelvis and moved it all around. And this was also just with the forward fold, but we ended up going to Warrior 2, which is a really logical kind of next pose. But I would stand on a block and then drop one side of the pelvis down and up. I lift the pelvis down and up. So I try to get this lateral pelvis movement. And I don't want that in Warrior 2, but if I have a felt sensation of it, I know what it feels like when it happens in Warrior 2.
Let's show that. Do you want to show that? Because that hip drop is a really common movement fault that you might be seeing as a yoga therapist. Your client comes in and they've got a lot of back pain, hip pain, sacroiliac pain, knee pain. Then you watch them walk and they've got a lot of hip drop. You watch them stand up on something and the hip kicks way out to the side. The knee falls in.
I try to do it so I'm just here, right? And taking my hands on my hip. So this is also a good balance thing, but you can use a wall, right, or a chair. I am just trying to take my pelvis and tilt it down, like drop this side down and then lift this side up. And then drop it down and lift it up.
Show the wrong thing more slowly, the wrong action when you drop the hip. Yeah, that hip sticks way out to the side, and the standing leg is no longer perpendicular to the floor. And then you get that forward tilt. Connect it to Warrior 2 now for us.
Well, so then when I come to Warrior 2, right, I'll drop this hip down so I can get into it. So then I'm like, oh no, I gotta come back in there. What needs to happen is I actually have to almost lift up the front half, right? I have to lift up the front half and for it to get level. What's required for that in my body is I got to get my core. I got to get my core integrated, and I got to use that to help lighten the load on that pelvis. If I'm just kind of letting the weight of my ribs and my core and all the tissue and all the organs rest on that front pelvis, of course it's going to drop. It's too much. I love to think what part of my body can do the work to keep the other hip grounded. So I've got to use the lower abdominals to come to the rescue to secure the pelvis as I open up my leg. And then I get opening in all sorts of other tissue that would have been bypassed. I get work in tissue that would not have had the opportunity to get stronger. Like, it's just great. It's a really fun way to do it.
It's literally therapy. It's like literally not bypassing. And these are all good prep poses. I used the stepping onto a yoga block, but in a different way for Warrior 2, very similar. And I think that what, we could see so well in your pelvis was letting people get familiar with the feeling of when the pelvis is doing that drop when you bend into that knee.
Right.
So can I show how I used it this morning? Isn't that funny that we both did that? So typically when people go to step up, so we're connecting this to daily life, when I go to step up and I use those hip flexors to lift the leg, this is again addressing the front leg in the pose, the hip swings out, the knee swings in. So this was happening in our high lunge episode. We talked about this. And of course it carries over to the Warrior 2. And then when I try to step up, I get a lot of faults here, right? So this other hip drops and this one lifts as I try to lift myself up into the pose. And like Jane was saying, that this doesn't stay long. So if instead I find these deep rotators and I engage them, and then I go to step up into the pose, I'm trying to extend the hip and get that to work. So instead of this is here, and my knee is centered over my ankle. The leg could even turn out, keeping this firm, not letting it kick out to the side, zipping up, adjusting that pelvic tilt, coming out of the anterior tilt, getting into the more neutral tilt. And then we're connecting it to the yoga pose. So then if I do a Warrior 2, most people will come into the pose by arching the back, sticking the butt out, the knee comes in, the butt sticks out, right? So they're like this in the pose. Yeah. And so instead, if I find those deep rotators of the hip, contract them. Right. Now I've got some external rotation and the thigh bone is dropped down. Right. And now this also drops down, which is what Jane was getting at. I pick that up, adjust the tilt, keep the contraction here, hold the joint in the socket using the rotator cuff, and then add the core and I sink in. Now the pose is being held from here. This is working, but actually kind of mildly when I feel a lot of good work through here.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So then this is how, when you're thinking about prepping for your more complex pose, and we understand that Warrior 2 is just a really basic pose and you want to flow past and get it to some sort of arm balance or inversion. We understand that. But if you set the foundation good in some of these basics, then you've got a good Ardha Chandrasana. If you've got a good half moon pose, then you can do candy cane. So the apex pose today for us was half moon Ardha Chandrasana, and it based on this Warrior 2, which was based on single leg stance with tree pose, which was based on stepping onto a yoga block, stepping over, and just recruiting these muscles that hold the weight bearing leg in its socket. There's a group of people here all standing on one leg, maintaining their balance for over a minute without struggle. Which is just, everyone's happy when they can balance on one leg in yoga. That's why a lot of people want to have a decent tree pose, and that's what they want out of their practice, and this is how. And Warrior 2 is a part of that. Yeah. Because it's emphasizing those hip abductors, which are the stabilizers.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. So yeah, Warrior 2 has so much more to teach us and offer us. Actually, let me put it this way. You can do Warrior 2 and just have a good time. Or you can do Warrior 2 and really get a deeper understanding of how to bring your body into a place where everyone's showing up to support the team.
Right, because eventually you'd like to go to side angle pose, and then you want to be able to take a bind, and then you want to be able to stand on one foot, and then what's that called when you wrap yourself around and then you bend over and then you stand up and your legs up in the air?
Yeah, I love that one. Bird of Paradise. And that one's got a good neurological challenge because the back foot becomes the front foot.
It feels good when it happens, and then sometimes you're like, oop,
Yeah.
it's not happening, so I
Yeah.
guess I wasn't prepped well enough.
Let's say we start from
Well, let me
Warrior
get
2,
this on so I can-
then we go to side angle, then we go to bound side angle, right? Then you bring your awareness into the front foot, step the back foot forward. You're facing forward in a forward fold. So the foot that was your back foot is now your foundational foot. You got to hug the thigh in, you got to really get connected, and then you got to press down with what was the back foot to come to a stand. There's something in that switching. There's something about making that front foot light or allowing it to be light.
When you were
that
so
really
collapsed onto
confuses
it.
people's bodies.
Right, because if you're not using the back leg in Warrior 2, if you didn't build that foundation through the whole class, and then you're binding so your whole body weight wants to just collapse
Rest
in order
on
to
it,
get
right.
Yeah, and now you have to lift it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good prep. It's about good sequencing and good prepping.
Yeah. Very cool. So that's an interesting thing to think about. We'll have to do Bird of Paradise some other time.
So some of the other opportunities in Warrior 2 is it's a great place to work on shoulder mechanics and start to learn how to work with your shoulders so that you're not just doing it in Tadasana, that you have some opportunities to understand where your shoulders are. And I would say that the medial border, the inner edge of the shoulder blade, we're looking for those borders to be parallel to the spine. And then the shoulder blade is neutral here, which means it has a slight posterior tilt. The top of the scapula is slightly back, so that
Behind,
little push of the bottom tip of the shoulder blade into support. But now, how do we get that shoulder up there if we're really having trouble getting the head of the arm bone back? Another trick is to take your arms into what I dream of genie arms.
Yeah.
And you raise that to shoulder height and you're zipping up, monitoring pelvic tilt. The arm bones are internally rotated here. Then you draw the head of the arm bone back. And then you start to lift the arms up, staying crossed. And you can always widen the elbows for those with more sensitive shoulders. Pause when you run into that roadblock, as Jane is fond of saying. But instead of just waiting, I would say zip up your belly, make sure your core is working. Because as you start to lift your arms, you might lean your rib cage back. So firm up in the abdominals, draw the head of the arm bone back again, and then lift the arms overhead. And then we can just open the arms out, like holding a giant beach ball, like there might be at like a concert or something, like at a rave. Your arms are in this kind of rounded shape, and the arms feel like they're sitting on the shoulder blades, like where you would attach the wings of a Halloween costume. Most people hold their arms up using their necks. You would never attach for Halloween the wings of your costume to your neck. We understand that those wings are on the upper back. And this is where we want to feel the work in the pose.
You know what I was trying when we were doing the I Dream of Genie arms is pull them wide.
You mean like the scapula wide?
No, so like grab your arms, and try to pull the arms wide.
Get your triceps to
yeah,
fire.
and it's like, woo, it like really kind of feels secure.
This is what I love about using like Warrior 2 as a base and then play with things. Like what happens if I reach the arm? What happens if I pull it in? Different muscles fire.
Yeah.
How does that meet your purpose? And how does that meet the person in front of you who's either too kyphotic or too, back bendy?
Right.
How do we start to get
Neutral.
Yeah. One other way that you can play with how to access deeper hip flexion or to slow down hip flexion in the pose. Jane hinted at this when she said, pivot on your heel as you externally rotate the front leg. When you're on that heel, you're kind of digging in. That heel, it's triggering the glutes, as we mentioned, and it's slowing down the hip flexion, that readiness of some people to just drop into the pose so fast and collapse into the joint.
Yeah.
But then you have your really tight people who really just can't sit low. And if you do the opposite, again, play with opposites. If you lift that front heel, it
gives them,
it immediately unleashes that tucking tendency. We talked a lot about anterior tilt today, but you are going to have populations that come in really, really tucked.
Right.
And so you can lift that front heel and then have them sink into the pose, and that will just uncouple to allow appropriate hip flexion, right?
Yeah. You're almost like just using geometry to get the...
It's all about the angles, like when you play pool.
Yeah.
But also you could think of it as when I lift that heel, like we did in bridge pose. If you go to that episode, we lifted the heels. It tones the calf. It tones the hamstring. It tones the multifidi in the back. For that person who's too tucked, their abdominals are already too shortened.
Right.
Then you get the back to arch. Then the pelvis can suddenly release into Uttanasana, where we talked about doing that, or into a bridge where we want more of a yoga bridge with a back bend. So even though some of these things might seem like, well, God, why would I want to get that nuanced? These are just broad strokes, and you're going to start to hear it in our podcast. Lift the heel or drive the heel in, and then how you use the foot in really just kind of basic ways is going to start to drive the mechanics of the hip and the pelvic tilt and just help people who can't find the pose.
Right. And to have the pose serve them. Right? Because when we do the poses and we just get there in the way the body offers it to us most efficiently, we're often repeating patterns that no longer serve us. And so what we're trying to do is have these poses, have this practice serve us so that we can continue to move through life with stability and ease.
If you can do this, then you can do something more complex. Like you can't figure out how to do Bird of Paradise.
Getting this stuff down means all those really super cool things are so much more available to you. So this pose will not just help you get up off the toilet, because we've been promoting that, and apparently that's not as exciting as this would allow you to do Bird of Paradise really well. So that's also both ends of the spectrum.
All right.
That's a wrap.
See you next time.